I'm here with Joan Griffith, who, if y'all don't know, is a mainstay of the Twin Cities jazz scene on guitar, bass, mandolin, every instrument that has strings on it, and some that don't, and has been my mentor and my good friend for quite a while now. And
Hey, Ben,
welcome,
nice to
Joan.
see you.
Good to see
Oh,
you
it's
again.
great. Absolutely.
So, is this space behind you? Is this like your virtual classroom at the moment for the college classes that you teach,
Yeah,
or
sometimes I sit here,
sometimes?
sometimes I sit on a chair over there, but yeah, as far as virtual goes, I'm still teaching at McAllister, and I have some lessons, individual lessons, and then I'm doing the McAllister Jazz Band, Mac Jazz, virtually too, this semester, and did last semester too, and it's a challenge, but so far we still have a band as far as I can tell, so it's good.
And I mean that was how we connected, was through the jazz combos at
Yeah,
McAllister and the big band, of course, and it was just,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was great fun for 4 years for me. It was just a blast
Oh, it was
to.
always great to have you in the band because it's like you're the only guitar player I've had that I could just it would like you could write the whole band as far as the time and everything else, and then also if I need somebody to take a solo, I would just look at you and say, "Okay, Ben, your turn,
I,
do it."
I,
So thank you. It made it really great for me too.
well, you didn't know it at the time that I was hiding my terror of sight reading by making up half the parts. You probably knew that,
I
but
I knew that you're a guitar player,
yeah,
so well, you
no,
got
that,
over
yeah, and that was back in it was like 2004 to 2008, and we got to do a lot of fun things that are, it sounds like it have been kind of part of the jazz band program at McAllister, like going to a recording studio to record the band. Several years going on a field trip to Eau Claire to check
right.
out the jazz
Yeah,
festival
and
there.
that year too, we had one of those years we had Maria Schneider, and that's in my book that you can't really go up much higher than that as far as a composer and as a influence in what's going on. So yeah, those were some good years with you in there, and there were other people in there that were really fine players too.
And how did that end up happening? I mean, were you connected with Maria Schneider before that, or was she doing some kind of
Uh,
tour or something?
Well,
Or
she was, she's from Windham, Minnesota, which is a little bitty town way out to the west. And her mom actually still lives in Minnetonka or one of the suburbs. So quite often, she'll come to Minnesota and visit with her mom. And then often she also brings her big band to play. She's been a guest uh, with the Twin Cities Jazz Society, and then she's also been a guest clinician conductor for Jazzman, the Jazz Minnesota Jazz Orchestra. So, for her coming to Minnesota is, I think, is a couple birds with one stone all the time. She can see her mom and maybe make it out to Wyndham. I'm sure that's. I have to organize a side trip out there, but then while she's here, she can do some clinic work or even bring the band to Minnesota. And so I think that it's a stop that she has on her calendar most years. But when I got the band, I wasn't planning on getting the band. If you remember, Carlton Macy was
Mhm.
the chair of the department, and he also was had organized originally Mac Jazz and had run it for 20 years, and he was going to go on sabbatical for that particular semester in the spring, and he just cornered me in the hall and said, "Do you want to do Mac Jazz for a semester?" And I actually said no. I said, "I don't have time for this. I'm already teaching a bunch of other places." And if you remember Carlton, he can be kind of persuasive. And he said, "Oh, it's just one semester." And I'm like, "Well," and then so in a weakened moment, I said, "Well, okay." And it's kind of as part of the deal, Maria Schneider was coming, and so he had already organized that. So
Hmm.
that was my first blast with Mac Jazz. It was like I didn't really know you guys. All of a sudden I'm in charge of the band, and he's got a tour going, and we've also got uh, Maria Schneider coming, and so um, it was kind of a steep learning curve for me to get you guys. I just wanted everybody to present themselves as best they could, and it was really great. I think that she was pleasantly surprised at not a big name, music school band, and it was fun. But yes, it was. And then now, of course, I've had the band ever since. I just, however long ago that was, I still have it. So, which is fun. The Mac kids are great, and uh, it's an interesting place to teach, and the kids are interesting, and the faculty's interesting. So,
What it is kind of like, it definitely has a very singular vibe over there, right? I mean, it's a liberal, intense liberal arts school in the
yeah,
Midwest, and it's kind of like
yeah,
every student
yeah.
comes in with a whole thesis prepared about whatever it is, musicology or the
I
music
know
that you're
about
playing,
everything.
and you're like, let's okay, that's cool. Let's play this piece in time with a solid group.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a great place to teach, but you're right. The student body is very highly educated before they even get there, and highly motivated, and not necessarily. And it's interesting because to be a really good musician, um, you certainly have to know a lot of things, and you have to intellectually understand a lot of things. But to be a really good player, you have to have the patience to sit in a chair and do repetitive stuff. And that's not necessarily the Mac student strong point, because people get things, still they're used to, grasping things intellectually in a nanosecond,
Hmm.
and that's fine, but it doesn't necessarily help you play your instrument really well sometimes. So it is, you're right. I'm like, well, that's fine, but let's just groove.
Yeah, you had two. And I'm not sure you were aware at the time, but you were very famous around the music department amongst the students for having a couple catchphrases. But one was like, "If the groove isn't fitting right, it's laying there like a big fat egg." So that was a so. We, and the other one was anti groove, I think, which is
Oh, the
great,
anti-groove.
which is so
Yeah.
descriptive. No,
Yeah.
we had a great time with that, and it was that was my good friend Andrew Foreman, of course, who was there at the same time and is a
Okay.
wonderful bass player, and we were our yeah, that was kind of our joke at the time, was like, well, something doesn't smell right. Oh, it's the
Must,
groove, and it's probably in the
yeah.
bass. It's bass. What are you doing?
What do you guys
Yeah,
really? Yeah. Well, as a teacher yourself, I'm sure your students are going, hey, has Ben ever said this to you? Yeah. Well,
right. No, it was
yeah.
great. And it was cool because around that time, I think you had done an album release
Oh,
for your
yeah.
record, and so we, like, as a band, or at least a portion of the band, got to go to the artist quarter, which was
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the club at
Oh,
the time, and see you do
do
your
my
own
thing.
tunes live with Laura, and it was great. It was
Oh,
really
yeah, that was
cool.
great. You guys came to that, and yeah, it's a I think that in academia anyway, that the way that you kind of stay current and uh, validated within an academic setting mostly is by writing papers, and people have their scholarship thing that they're doing. But as a musician, um, uh, for me anyway, I think of myself as a teacher, but I also think of myself equally, if maybe not more, a little bit, as actually a player on the street, play lots of different gigs, and I take pride in being able to do that. Some days it's a jazz job, and some days it's a church job, and some days it's I play a fair amount in the theater scene in the pit, which you've done with me too, which is a different kind of preparation, and challenge, and I've played a ton too with the Minnesota Orchestra, playing mandolin mostly, but sometimes a little guitar. And I did play electric bass one time with the Minnesota Orchestra, where they did, some group was touring doing show tunes, and I got to play Suddenly Seymour from with them, and I got to play Dancing Queen with Minnesota Orchestra. So I figured that my career was completely complete after that. But that's a different, that's teaching is one thing, but for me, the thrill of playing a gig is still pretty paramount, and being able to walk into a place where people have never heard you before, and being able to do what you're supposed to do, and just kind of be part of the tradition of that is really fun. So.
And what was the show that you played mandolin on? Wasn't it you?
Oh, with orchestra? Well, for the most of the time, interestingly enough, Gustav Mahler, there's several symphonies where he has some mandolin, Das Lied from der Erde, the last one, and I believe it's Mahler 7 and Mahler 4. I might have the numbers wrong. Sorry, audience, if you don't think I don't know what I'm talking about. I probably don't. But yeah, and there's some Respighi that's got a mandolin. Let's see what else. I think it was Verdi. I played Verdi too. But usually when those classical guys throw mandolin in their tunes, it's to create some kind of little folky vibe for the moment, and with Mahler, it's always this sort of imaginary, beautiful, simple peasant kind of setting, and all of a sudden the mandolin has got something that, and usually the orchestration for those things is so spare. It's like, the whole orchestra has been blasting, all 80 of them now for, 10 minutes. And then everybody stops except for like one cello and the mandolin.
Oh,
my
goodness.
And at that point, you've been waiting with Das Lied, I didn't come in until an hour and 5 minutes until the piece. So I had to sit there for that long. And not tune or play or warm up or anything, and all of a sudden you have a solo, and it's stressful, I gotta say, And every time that happens at rehearsal, the first rehearsal, the conductor always says, stops the whole orchestra and says, "Mandolin, can you play louder?" And you're like, "No, it's a mandolin." But they have to get over that, and then eventually it turns out all right. But so yeah, orchestra playing. I mean, I've played a lot too with the pops things, and then I did play when they did the Bernstein Festival. The Bernstein Mass starts with a guitar chord, with a guitar player, me, standing up and playing a G chord. So the whole piece starts like that, and then the tenor comes in and starts to sing Simple Song, and then I'm playing. It's just me and the tenor for like the first A of the tune, maybe a little longer. So, it's every time I've played with them, it's been you're playing an instrument that people don't expect in the orchestra. The orchestrator really wants it to be heard. And thirdly, you're usually just playing by yourself or with a really small group. So it's fun, but fun is maybe not the right word. I'm really glad I got to do it, but it is, it's not a relaxing sort of gig, So
right, that's almost on the equivalent to the level of pressure of like the stereotypical percussionist who has 1,020 measures of rest and then has to come in with one fill at exactly the right.
I know. It's just to give you a heart attack. Right? Yeah. Okay. Violas, tell me when we get to measure 1,087, and I'll get ready. So, but. Yeah, and it's funny because people in the audience think that I think they have a sense that the orchestra sits up there and they're playing all this beautiful music and they're just awash and agog in mystery and the magic of the music, and that's not really true. I mean, everybody up there is thrilled to be playing, but it's not, there's a lot of pressure to be exactly right all the time. And uh, so, yeah, I don't know. I think what was the last one I played? I guess the last thing I played the orchestra was doing, or as orchestras have been doing to make money, is that they will play a movie. They'll show the
Hmm.
movie on the screen above the orchestra, and then the orchestra will play the soundtrack. And I think they did that for Star Wars and God knows what, some Disney things. But I played when they did West Side Story, and that was pretty cool. The guitar part in West Side Story is beautiful to play, and it's some electric and some nylon and some mandolin in it too. So
Perfect.
yeah, it's
Oh,
pretty fun. But it was a weird thing too, in that when I walked into the orchestra hall, I walked in there 1,000 times, and I've got my amp and all my stuff and my part, and I look in the rehearsal room on the stage, and there's like 80 chairs, of course, set up, and every chair has got a headset on it, and I'm like, whoa. And then I realized that the markings on my music, there were some markings I didn't understand from some previous guitar player from who knows where, Indianapolis, wrote on, like something like 60 to 62, and then the little quarter note. And I'm like, I wonder what that is. Well, we played 80% of that movie score with a click, the entire orchestra with a click. Well,
wow.
you know what I'm saying. It was like, you're kidding me. And since the original soundtrack was done in 59 or 60 or something like that, I don't think they didn't do the orchestra with a click when they recorded it. They just conducted with the singer singing. And so the click would be like da 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 da. Like, wow, that's
Whoa.
oh, I know. And not only that, um, part of it was really great because on the groovy ones that weren't anti-groove, the groovy ones, uh, for there's a place in the fugue that goes ba dee ba doo da ba dee da doo 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 da bing bing bing, all that stuff, do do ba dee da da do 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 ba do do ba. That is in time. That's a dance thing, and the guitar and the vibes are in unison for quite a ways. And usually, if we were doing this in the hall, I couldn't hear the vibes to save my life, because they're like a football field away.
Hmm.
But with the click, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be good for a change on this part. And so that was great. But the other weird thing about it was that half the string players refused to put their headsets on. I think for some reason they felt like that was, I don't know what, beneath them, or they didn't need it, or I don't know exactly what they thought. But they ended up, as orchestras are often a little bit behind the conductor, if you watch. The strings were where they like to be with the conductor, but everybody on the click was in front of that. So there was whole places where the whole orchestra was like a beat off from each other.
Whoa.
And And I don't know if you know the tune, I Feel Pretty. I feel pretty. Boom, da, 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 dun, 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 dee, da, da, I feel pretty. Boom, da, da, da. Okay, so the tune goes bass on beat one, boom. Trumpets go one, da, 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 da. They come in on beat two, boom, da, 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 da. Right? That's how it's supposed to go. Well, the strings are so far behind that it was like da, 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 da. So anyway, that's enough orchestra stories. It's just a different world, And if you and I were playing a gig together, there wouldn't be a question about where the time is, or what we'd have to work on is how we felt the feel would be the coolest,
Hmm.
and this beautiful interaction sonically. And sometimes when you have 80 people on stage and people are so far apart, it's a it's a very interesting thing that can happen where you think you're with everybody, but you're maybe not, So it's just, who knows? So that's what I know about the orchestra.
Well, that I mean that's interesting too because I even have gotten you know one or two glimpses of that in the couple musicals that I've done with you and Anita
Mhm.
over at Artistry, and she's conducting like mad, and she's like the main conduit for being tapped into what the actors are and the singers are
Exactly.
doing, right? And so everybody's
Yeah.
relying on her to
Right.
keep
Yeah.
to keep everything gelled together, which is
Yeah. And
interesting.
that's it's interesting because in showbiz conducting, not just Anita, but any other showbiz conductor, is that as a player, you have to be right. When they give the downbeat, you have to be right at the bottom of the downbeat, like boom, da, 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 boom, da, 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 da. And the orchestra, almost always, they're like on the up part, da 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 da, and that's just it depends. Like there's whole websites and chat rooms right now of people discussing where one is with a particular conductor
Wow.
because I know. So yeah, it's just a different, how people interpret what the conductor means, and how people work together in that it's I find it pretty tricky to come from a tradition where you're playing right on top of the beat, or you're laying the time down, to going into the orchestra. It's not that I can't play classical music and play duets with people, but with a conductor in that situation. It's a really tricky skill, and those guys that do it well, it's unbelievable to know that they can just watch that conductor and put where it has to happen right where the one is, even though it doesn't look like one to me.
Yeah.
They know where it is. So it's just, all musics have different kind of aesthetic rules,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure you played a lot of gospel tune with gospel groups, and like the beat, like the way that the gospel groove is laid down, or in a kind of more typical blues groove, the the beats in the back of the beat, and there's other jazz or the beats in the front of the beat, and then there's some drummers who play right in the middle of the beat. So it's just depends on the style and the person, and the what people have gotten used to in that particular genre. So
Right. It's like these really deep whole set of worlds of like how do you dance to it?
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
right.
every sub pocket of music and subgenre has its own kind of unspoken rules about where the beat is and what it's supposed to
Yeah,
feel like.
right. Oh,
And
I know.
a lot of times it's
Yeah,
not explicit. It's like you just go in, that is supposed to sound like
it's
that,
supposed-
or
yeah.
and
Well, it's
certainly
very
for me that
complicated. Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating. It's
Yeah,
cool
it
that
is fascinating. I talked to this hip hop drummer one day, and I just was like, "What are you, like the way that he was describing where he thought the beat went, and if it was swung at all or not, was like something I hadn't even really considered because I haven't played that many gigs like that. So, um, but I do know from myself that I learned to play jazz in Kansas City, and the feel in KC is entirely different than the feel here in the Twin Cities. When I moved here,
hmm,
I was like, "Whoa, okay, I got to adjust my time feel." And I would play with other people. I remember I played this one drummer one time at Dakota, and I didn't know him. And at the end of the first break, we just walked over to the bar for a second, and I said, "Hey, you're not from here, are you?" And he goes, "No, I'm from Philly." And I'm, "Oh, well, that explains that." Because even within, I mean, we're just playing standards. It's not like we're playing new music, and that every city or region has got a different way to lay the beat down. And in Kansas City, um, people are not afraid to play a medium tempo.
hmm.
They can play a medium to slow ballad, and nobody has a gets nervous. But here, in the Twin Cities, it's things are always a little on the upside of the tempo wise, and it's always a little in the front of the beat.
Hmm.
So I don't know why that is, but it is quite different. Yeah.
That's interesting. And where would you, at least playing with that drummer from Philly, where would you put
Oh, he
Philadelphia
was
on
in the
that map?
KC bag. He was in the back. He was just. I think the difference, and you had mentioned it actually earlier, is that how do you dance to it?
Hmm.
Because in Kansas City, when I was learning how to play at every place, whether it was a supper club or a little blues bar or a hotel, when they used to have music in hotel lounges and restaurants. If people, I mean, all the time we'd be playing and people would get up to dance, even amongst the tables, they would just like decide that that was a good thing. And when I got here, I was playing, I think it was in, I don't know what that, it must be, I think it's a DoubleTree now downtown and in the bar. And there were tables that people could sit at and stuff like that. And we were playing and some people got up to dance and the wait staff came over and told them to sit down. And so,
Yeah, well, we don't do
but
that
it wasn't
here.
a dance floor. I mean, there wasn't a
Hmm.
dance floor, but that was the thing. It's like, it seems like at the Dakota, for example, nobody gets up and dances. But
Right.
if that Dakota was in KC, I guarantee you there'd be people dancing.
Oh, interesting.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and so that's the vibe. It's the Kansas City's an old blues town,
Hmm.
and Charlie Parker was from there, and it's just when you go to a gig in KC, you want people to dance. That's if you don't get them up dancing, it's maybe a little too intellectual. So.
Hmm. Well, I remember we as in, my compatriots in McAllister Jazz Band were kind of fortunate enough to play for dancers, I think. So I think we
Yeah.
did that with you at some point in that
Mhm.
big ballroom in the campus center. I
Yeah,
remember,
well,
or at least a couple times maybe, and we got to
we
play
did.
for swing dancers.
Hmm.
And
Well, part of that was that you were there when they were doing the renovation of Janet Wallace, and so we got bumped out of the concert hall, and then
mm,
we had to as long and SOA did with the African Music Ensemble. We had our space to perform was this big ballroom over in Kagan, the student center, and it just to me seemed kind of dumb to be having like just a concert in a room that looked like there should be dancers. So we did swing dancing, and we also had our boogie nights. We had, if you remember, we had our disco uh, set too, and people would do that. So
oh, I think I missed out on that. I would have for sure remembered that.
did you miss out on the Earth, Wind, and
Yeah,
Fire extravaganza?
yeah. No, I wasn't there for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was super fun. Is because, as you well would imagine, that the Mac students had to have costumes. So
Oh,
yeah, I know it was pretty funny, and we did rustle up a disco ball even for it. So
perfect. Probably
I know.
not that hard. Yeah,
No, it was really. It turned
yeah.
out to be a lot easier than I thought. but but again, big band was dance music. That's what it was. And if you're Count Basie was the best band because it was the best one of the best dance bands ever. It wasn't. It was. Jazz didn't turn into be listening music until the bebop guys went into those little clubs and decided they were just going to play fast tempos and
Hmm.
experiment with things. And but even those guys early on thought that people should dance to bebop. So, but it didn't. And now jazz, it's like the Dakota again. It's a listening room.
Hmm.
It's not a. But that's a. It's not now. It's not so recent, but the I think the tension, in the tension in a lot of the tension in American popular music, uh, has to do with its dance roots. Because lots of the dance roots come from the African contribution, and we know how that causes some rift, in our society, what comes from Africa and what's appropriate in polite civilization and blah 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 blah.
Hmm. What
So
the Western European stuff is
yes,
that
right,
we're the
yes.
baggage that we're carrying versus,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
and if you go to an eighth grade dance and see those kids doing their very sexy maneuvers, and the parents get all bent out of shape, that's kind of where that's an expression of that. Where does dance fit into our
Mm,
society? And if you go past a church, on Sunday morning, and it used, say like, 8:30 is the traditional service, 11 o'clock is the contemporary service, and the only difference between the services is the music.
mm,
It's the same sermon, the same liturgy, but the contemporary, the traditional one probably has organ and piano, and singers, choir maybe. And what does the contemporary service have? They put up the plexiglass and get the drum set out.
right.
So you know it's just, it's things to consider, but I do think it's interesting to contemplate, the role that dance has in American
Hmm.
society, and if there's tension, why, so.
Right. And some of the, I mean, from what I've, my experience playing in church is pretty limited, but just what I've seen online and who I've listened to, like some of the most amazing kind of dance grooves that are also at this extreme technical level are like from black gospel,
Yeah,
contemporary black gospel players and drummers. And like, you're like,
right. Oh my
what is
gosh,
going
yeah.
on? But it's
Yeah, well,
clearly
it
you
comes
want to
from,
dance to it. It's no question. You know what I mean?
well, right. And you come from a school, McAllister, that's got one of the biggest African music ensembles in the country. And if you talk to Soa Mensa, who runs it,
Hmm.
it's all about dance, and how much that dance and rhythm is embedded in Western African music, that it's how you express yourself on a daily basis. And it's not necessarily associated with any kind of sexual courting activity. That's just part of how you express yourself.
Hmm.
And the misunderstanding of that, into the kind of strictly European Protestant, even Catholic tradition, it's just like how they got to deal with these people that are dancing to express themselves. So,
Right.
so
Right.
that it continues on, and as musicians as we are, we're on that line all the time, where what that music, what does it mean, and how does it move us, and what does that mean, and
Hmm.
what does it mean to our audience, and so kind of interesting stuff.
Have you ever hung out with any of the kind of the tango scene people, either in Kansas City or
No,
here in
I
the Twin
didn't know
Cities?
any. I
Yeah.
didn't know any tango people then,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the same thing. I mean, all those South American countries. Well, not to diverge too far, but the whole story of the popular music of the Western Hemisphere has to do with the African influence into whether it's Afro English or Afro French or Afro Portuguese or Afro Spanish, and all in different places in Cuba you get the rumba, which is Afro Spanish, and you get the tango in Argentina, which is a different Afro Spanish, but in Brazil, of course, you get samba, which is Afro Portuguese, and we get Afro blues, Afro American, So all those things, have a component of of European music and a component of West African music, and how they develop within a certain culture is specific, to the culture and their history, and
Hmm.
who came and who settled and who hung around and who jammed and who got recorded and blah blah. So totally
You
interesting stuff. Yeah.
you were talking kind of before we got going here about you were doing a lot of jazz violin playing and practicing during COVID and during
Oh
lockdown
my God.
because
Yeah,
why not? We've got the time and
right. And
got the
I'm
space
nobody
for it.
has to hear me do it.
Yeah.
That's right. Um, yeah, I don't know. I I told the violinist, so this is quite a while ago, that I was going to learn. I was learning to play the violin, and he looked at me and said, "Are you insane?" You know, and I was like, "Well, that's not a very nice thing to say to a person," you know. But the I don't know if you've ever tried to play the violin, but for a guitar player or a piano player, you know, we there's things that we have to learn how to do. But one of the things that we can do right off the bat is not sound too bad if you get the guitar in tune. You get the guitar in tune, and and you learn a few little basic things. You can. You can play some tunes, right off the bat. Maybe it's Dylan or, something, a couple, three, four chords that aren't too tricky. Or you don't even have to use the whole fretboard. Play little chords and, learn how to play things that you like right off the bat. Um, and it gets harder later on, but the violin, it's got a lot of technical challenges to it. And one, of course, is that, you don't have frets. So you have to be able to learn the technique. It's not even learning the technique to play in tune. You have to be able to make sure you hear perfectly in tune. It's not like you just put your finger down and there's a G.
Right.
If that were if that were true, but so there is this really high bar of understanding and manipulating pitch that's really tricky. The other thing that's really tricky is holding the stupid thing,
Hmm.
uh, because with guitar, for the most part, the guitar supports itself, on your leg or something like that. And if you need extra help, put a strap on. But the violin, you have to be able to balance you have to balance it. It's uh, and that's hard to figure out, and then be able to balance it in a way that you can move your hand at the same time without strangling the neck. And so these things are an issue. But the actual real issue for me, and I think most people when they play the violin, is the bow, because the bow is well, in guitar too, your right hand, the left hand doesn't make any sound really. I mean, it does a lot of work, but it doesn't, unless you're doing some tapping, it doesn't really do anything sonically. And
Hmm.
your whole expression rhythmically, tone wise, balance wise, comes from your right hand, and how graceful and supple you are with your right hand. And even if you play with a pick and use all down picks, you still have to manipulate so some are louder than softer, to make any kind of
Hmm.
music anyway. And the bow can change the pitch if you push too hard.
Oh.
I know there's
Oh.
lots of terrible things I'm going to say, but the bow, and then how fast or how slow you go changes the timbre of it, and the pressure. It's all about speed. Balancing speed and pressure at the same time, and it has to go perfectly straight on the string, perpendicular. Otherwise, if it starts sliding this way, then you get these. Then your tone goes to pieces.
Hmm.
And see, a lot of these things aren't are issues on the guitar, but they're not as I don't think they're as finely. Uh, they're just differently, precise on the guitar. So so anyway, so I'm not exactly sure what I just find what I've been finding anyway about playing is that um, uh, it's it's refining my attention to pitch,
Hmm.
and it's refining my attention to melody too. Um, because truthfully, my real interest in playing the guitar is actually playing harmony. And you stack up all those tones together, and it's just like sublime. A 6/9 chord, oh yes,
Hmm.
or a sharp 9 chord with a flat 13. Oh yes, and the the column of sound you build with those individual chords and the colors and the kind of emotional feeling that each chord can give you, to me, is just, oh, it's just magnificent and majestic and mysterious, and brings tears to my eyes how expressive harmony can be. And so most of my life has been spent thinking about that, and as a bass player, thinking about chord progressions and how harmony works as a story when you tell a story during the song. And it's not like I don't notice the melody. I mean, I can sing most all the melodies of the tunes that I play, but it's sort of like the id. It's like it's this unknown region that I don't really have to do. And now that I'm playing the melody, I'm like, wow, look at those. There's all those intervals that repeat, and there's this interval, and what if I played this upside down? And it's a kind of a fascinating look, and it's looking at the same thing that I'm looking at for years, but with a different attention. So
interesting. Yeah,
yeah, it is interesting.
Kind of, not. I'm sure that's pretty common on the guitar. It seems like a lot of us start out. What's the first thing that we learn from a book? It's probably a chord.
Yeah, right. Go for a
And
D
then
chord right
second,
now.
it's like how to articulate that. How to strum some kind of rudimentary rhythm. So it's like
Hmm.
harmony and rhythm we start out thinking about, and melody is the thing that you just may either you do it instinctively to sing the song on top of that, or
Exactly.
it's
That's
already
what.
supplied for you by somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's my experience for sure. And the other thing that it makes it really interesting is that I do a lot of teaching of people to do improvisation, and what I've discovered is that, I mean, I sort of knew this before, but not really, that whatever instrument you play really determines your awareness of music, or your. It's like it's like if you're a soprano and all you ever do is sing the melody, you're going to be really hard pressed to tell me what the tenor is doing while you're
Mm.
singing, because you're just not thinking about that. But if you're the tenor, and you've almost immediately got your part going, and also you can think about, you know what the melody is, so you've got two things going at the same time, playing singing tenor. And if you sing bass, well, then you you can, if you're thinking about it, you have a view from the bottom of the whole structure, and it's a lot easier to see it from the bottom than to see it down from the top.
Mm.
And so when I started just playing, and it happened when I was playing mandolin too, but more so now with the violin. But when I started just playing violin, it was like I had to look at the changes of the tune. And normally, when I play a jazz tune on the guitar, I don't have to look at the changes ever. I know what they are because I play them all the
Hmm.
time. So when I improvise, I know what they are. But with the violin, it was like, because my attention is now on this one particular thing, it's like, wow, huh? There's an E7 in there? Who knew? You know? And then I have the advantage of that I know what all the notes are in the chord. So when I do see the harmony, I can find them. But I think about violinists that say, or trumpet players that say, I want to learn how to improvise. They don't have any of the foundational equipment to do it. They probably don't play the piano. They probably
Mm.
never played the bass. And so their idea of what's going on underneath is just sort of like this nebulous, unformed cloud of sound that, and they want to improvise on top of that. Well, we kind of have to dig into the nebula there and see what is actually being played. So it's fascinating to kind of have to, see things, just go to the other side and see what people might perceive from a different viewpoint.
Hmm. Right, and it kind of changes. I mean, if your background is in an instrument that doesn't play doesn't spend time in that nebula of, what the harmony is, and you can't easily do it
Yeah.
on your own instrument, then it's hard to make
Yeah.
that, the thing that you're playing on top of tangible in the same sense. So you got to
Right.
either
And
spend time on the piano or,
mhm.
do a lot of ear training or,
Right. And then after,
you know.
you have to do a lot of time thinking about if that note, how that note, is it the root of the chord? Is it the third? Is it the
Hmm.
fifth? And if I used to sing in choir in high school, which in retro at the time I thought it was just fun and everything, but in retrospect I learned so much doing that, and that because what maybe I was just the nerdiest person in choir, probably true, but I either sang alto or tenor because we didn't have so many tenors, but I would spend a lot of my time just thinking about why singing the third of the chord was so cool,
Mm,
and how singing the fifth was like different, and I would keep track of that, in the course of choir rehearsal. That this is that note, this is this note, and it works if it's like this, and if the third's too high, it sounds crappy. I
hmm.
mean, I would, and I played in band too. I played in clarinet and band, and but yeah, I spent a lot of time just kind of thinking about where my part fit into everybody else's part and how it felt when I played certain pitches. But I don't think that's everybody thinks about that when they're in choir. But like I
Right.
said, I'm the most nerdy person in the world. But I already played guitar some, and I played piano, so it was not that a nebulous unformed cloud was really familiar to me already. I knew
Hmm.
what was I knew what were in chords up to the nine in high school. So not
And
not
did somewhere along the line, so did you start on guitar first of all? That was I was going to ask you
No,
that.
I started on piano
Okay.
because it was
Okay.
five. My mother and her mother, my grandmother, felt that children weren't civilized unless they could read music.
Ah,
So I'm not so sure this is true, but that's what she
right.
said. So
Yeah.
yeah, I started playing piano, and I did that, and then someplace along the line, my dad played a little guitar. I'm gonna take this out of the way. Whoops, come back. No, 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 no. Come on, people. Where's my meeting? Here we are. Ah, here we are. Sorry.
It's a whole
Am I
it's
back?
a whole
I don't
thing.
know what
You're
happened there.
back. Yep.
Someplace along the line, my dad played guitar a little bit and liked to
Hmm.
sing. And someplace along the line, I got a hold of a ukulele and then his guitar, and just kind of, I just taught myself, a C chord and a G chord, and sang songs that we sang in grade school, and thought that was the bee's knees, and then started playing clarinet in junior high. And I think at some point along the line there, I talked my mom into letting me quit piano. And if I would take clarinet lessons or guitar lessons, I didn't care, as long as I didn't like my piano teacher. Um, so yeah. So, and then as far as guitar goes, I heard two things when I was in, I don't know, maybe eighth grade, seventh, eighth grade. I heard Segovia, play some classical music, and Julian Bream, and I heard bossa nova for the first time. And those two musics brought me to playing nylon with my fingers, and led me to going to college to get a degree in classical guitar. So, and then someplace along the line, oh, I know, after college, actually, um, some friends of mine decided that it would be really super fun to form a cover band, and because that would be more fun than being waitresses, which since I've never been a waitress, I don't really know, but they said it would be more fun. But it was super fun in a cover band, and I started playing guitar at first, but then it turned out that we had a piano player and a vibes player, and it was like, the last thing we need is a guitar player here. So I ended up going to the pawn shop and getting a bass and a bass amp for a grand total of $30, and my my bass career was launched, and that was really great. It was super fun. It was the disco era, and so a lot of Earth, Wind and Fire, and Sly and the Family Stone, so kind of decent bass parts to learn, And those days, of course, there weren't any books, so we had to learn all of our tunes by ear. So, rehearsals were somebody brought the record and we all listened a couple times and
Hmm.
then played it. So,
That's pretty hard to beat. That's
well, the interesting thing is that I felt like I was the least talented of our group in that regard, and I'm really good ear wise, but what the heck is that? Can you
dog
hear
thing
that?
happening. Yeah.
I think who knows what that is. There must be something. Anita must
Oh.
be listening to something. Rosie has a tendency to sing along with music on YouTube if she doesn't like it particularly. So,
No
um,
joke.
yeah. Well, anyway, you should hear her with the violin. But yeah, it's sad. But yeah, but two of the people in the band. I went to a music school in Kansas City, and two of the people in the band had perfect pitch. So they would just listen to their part. This piano player who played saxophone, and she just like rip it right off. So I had to keep up.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was
Yeah.
cool, which I can, but yeah, it was good. It was a good fun time, and you learn a lot. Well, you've been in bands, you learn a lot about the business, and you learn a lot about how people behave in an audience, and you learn all kinds of cool stuff being in a band. So
Mm-hmm. And I also heard something about you grew up on an army base
oh,
or an air force base.
my dad was in the Air Force, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was cool. I mean, I think I went to five different grade schools and a couple different junior highs, and uh, yeah, some people find that upbringing kind of jarring, but my mom and dad and brother and we were all got along really well, and my mom particularly kind of made it seem like a great adventure.
Hmm.
So, for the most part, you know, there are kids in the world that are not nice to other kids, especially if they're new, but what can you do? You move along.
And your
But I think
brother is a musician as well, right? And
yes,
is a
he and
very
I, yeah, he's very
yeah.
accomplished. He's my younger brother, and he teaches at the Cleveland Institute. Teaches theory, music theory, and he's a composer to some degree. And he also, like me, plays classical gigs and jazz gigs
Hmm.
and pop gigs, and uh, yeah. So, and he's very busy. He's still teaching theory at the Cleveland Institute, and he plays once a week solo piano in the lobby of the Cleveland Clinic, and he plays at a temple, a Jewish temple, every week. And now he loves the liturgy and the music in that service, and has a couple other. He has a violinist he plays with all the time, and some flute player, and so yeah, he's a busy guy. So, and I don't know
No
how
joke.
we ended up doing that. Like I said, my dad liked to sing and play the piano, play the guitar a little bit. My mom. Um, played the piano a little bit, and she was funny. She would. I just thought all moms did this, but she'd be ironing, and we always had the radio on all the time. In those days, it was Elvis one minute, movie themes the next minute, and blah blah blah, some country the next minute, and she'd be ironing, and she put the iron down and put stuff away. Then she'd walk over to the piano and play the tune she just heard on the radio. I know, and I always thought, well, I guess that's what moms do. I don't know. And I would say, hey, mom, that's kind of cool. You could just do that. And she says, oh, anybody can do that. You need to learn how to read music. And as I've gone on my life now, I realize that's not true. I mean, anybody can learn to read music, but not everybody's got that kind of ear power. But,
Yeah.
but so I figured, well, she could do it. I could do that. And my brother and we'd hear stuff on the TV, and then we'd run to the piano and have a little um, competition to see who could figure out that TV commercial music quicker. So that was something. Besides play basketball and stuff like that, we also would play two piano stuff, and we got Oscar Peterson books and played out of that, and we got some Dave Brubeck books and played out of that, and and it didn't seem like that played movie themes, and it just seemed, and I think that it must have been some kind of innate talent that I had inherited, from my folks and my brother too. And both my parents were like, "You want to be musicians? Cool." You know, yeah, there was none of that find a real job or thing, which I think is a good thing. It took me a long time to make enough money to really, support myself really well. Standard of livings are different, but yeah, they were both of them super supportive, and kind of interesting. Yeah,
So it was just that was the landscape in your
that
household
was
was music all the time and a
music
lot of
all the
this and
time. Yeah, and when I
yeah.
was in high school, I had a guy. Well, when I was in high school, a guy moved. It was a lot of military kids in the school. A kid moved in from someplace, and he played the alto saxophone. And he came, all of a sudden he's in band one day. And I think maybe I was a sophomore or junior, but I walked into the band room one day and he's just ripping on the alto. And it was like, I mean, professional sounding to me, and he was a big Paul Desmond devotee already, and he was playing complete solos, from
Huh.
Time Out and Brubeck Goes to College and stuff like that. I mean, really, could really improvise, And he said, well, and so he's in jazz band too, which is, I'm sure we were just the worst jazz band, but he wanted to get a little quartet together, and so it turned out to be a quintet, but we found a piano player that played pretty good, a bass player who was pretty good in our high school, a drummer, and myself and him, and we made a little high school jazz quintet, but it was apart from school. I mean, I was the treasurer, so there you go. And we played at a couple bowling alleys, and we played at the NCO club on the bass. And I think my first pro gig was with this little quintet. We made money playing for some kind of military picnic, but on that first gig, I'm sure we played "Girl from Ipanema," and I'm sure we played "Take Five." And I mean, this is my first gig, and I think what happened there, and so we would rehearse this little quintet in my living room, in my parents' house, in my living room. And I think we did that primarily because my mother did not trust the drummer or the saxophone player she felt like maybe they were not as upright as maybe she wants as her daughter around them. And she was totally right. The drummer, those two are the only two guys I knew in my whole high school that ever smoked any marijuana, which I was like, wow. Except, don't know, I'm not going to, but whoa. And she made us rehearse in the living room so she could keep an eye on us. But I think
Oh.
that my brother was always around, and he was like, "Oh, that's kind of hip." I got to learn all those tunes too. But he's like in seventh grade, So,
Hmm.
so it was the landscape, like you said. It's just something that or maybe he might have been in ninth grade by then or eighth, um, but yeah, it was just something that was just part of what we did, and yeah, and we both went off to music school and both still play a bunch of gigs, and um, it'd be fun to play with him more. I've played a fair amount of gigs with him and as adults, and that's it's funny because we both still kind of play the same way, the same as we did when we were high school kids in a way. So
Sticks
hopefully I
with
know
you.
more now, but yeah.
And Joan, are you? Is there? I mean, I assume 100% of your teaching and playing, recording, etc., is online at the
Yeah,
moment. Is that correct?
it is. It
Yeah,
is. Yep.
yeah. I
Yeah.
remember literally. I mean, the last gig that I played was with you in your front yard for the
Yeah. That was
series that you were
great.
doing. That was
Yeah.
this summer, and I was like thrilled to play with another human being.
Well, we'll do that again as soon as it
Any
gets totally
instrument.
warm. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's always great to play with you, Ben. You always sound so fantastic.
Oh,
Um,
likewise.
but yeah, teaching online, you know how that is. It can be done. It's just a little goofy. Um, Doing an ensemble online is, to me, it's just sort of like the barest of solutions,
Mm.
because I meet with everybody individually in the band once a week for 15 minutes, and they play some assignment thing that I've got for them, and we've got tunes that we're working on a as a group, and I'm hoping by the middle of the semester we'll be able to meet together a little bit. Last semester, right at the middle of the semester, the college president relaxed some of the rules and said if you wanted to meet with a group of 10 students or so in a big enough space, go
Mm.
ahead. So I split the band in half because I actually have two complete rhythm sections. Um, Split the band in half, and then we had the Monday band and a Wednesday band, and we rehearsed in that great big. You've been in that great big room that we
Mm-hmm.
have, the rehearsal room, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We rehearsed in there for 2 weeks, and that was just it was just super fun. Even everybody, all the students were like, "Oh, thanks for organizing this. I've missed playing so much." And but then there was that big spike again, and things got shut down. But I'm hoping that maybe by mid-semester, if we can have, man, if she would even let us have 5 people together at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, I would do it in a heartbeat. So
It's tough. Do you know a friend of mine, Adam Meckler, who's a trumpet player,
Mhm.
and he moved to
Yeah,
Michigan recently with his family,
yeah.
but he's doing this big band program, jazz program there that he's teaching, and he's got like for the brass ensemble, they all have covers on the bells of the instruments, and then they have
Mhm.
masks at the same time.
Yeah,
But he
yeah.
was smart and he put their brand logo on the masks, so it's like cool merch that he can sell in the future.
Oh, funny.
But it also
Yeah,
covers the bell of the saxophone or the trumpet. So
yeah. Well, different schools allow different things. Uh, St. In McAllister, you could only meet for the first half of the semester as a teacher if you could only meet with first years
hmm.
because those are the only people they let on campus.
Oh.
Oh, I know.
Oh.
See, okay, so this is a big problem. It's like I don't even know my first years, and the band is all years, and so you could only meet with first years. And then she opened it up that you could meet with the other people, and but but in St. Thomas, just down the road, they had orchestra all semester in person. I know. So it would just depend on what you were allowed to do, and the president of McAllister was quite cautious,
Mm-hmm.
and if the governor said any little thing, she would say, "Oh, we'll do even more than that."
Mm.
So I'm not sure what the guideline. We're in what's called the quiet period right now. The school just started up, and that means that everything is completely virtual until everybody's sure that they're quarantined and blah blah blah. But maybe when the first 2 weeks are over, that if there's a relaxation of any sort, I'm on it. So yeah, but yeah,
It's a
there was
whole.
no in-person playing at all, and the music building wasn't even open for the first month. You couldn't even
Hmm.
go practice piano if you wanted to.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole this kind of like weird economy that we're living in right now.
Hmm.
Economy in large quotes because it's obviously every job has taken a huge hit, but there's
Yeah.
this kind of strange, like I've gotten a couple emails about, oh, can you do this recording session or
Hmm.
this thing that we're gonna record on video ahead of time, and it was like all of a sudden part of the equation is not only how much do you get paid and how much time does it take, but like is it safe?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And are people wearing masks? And it's just a weird,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot
it's
of things to consider, and Mac too had installed a air filtration system for the rehearsal rooms, and which is really great, and they also built some plexiglass shields that you could wheel around, so you could
Mm.
keep them between you and the saxophone if you wanted to. So yeah, I mean, I always felt it was super safe, but there just was there. I think that administration wanted to be very cautious about what
Mm.
might happen. So
Yep.
yeah, so we'll see. It's. Like I said, my plan is by the mid semester we'll be able to do a few little things together, and that would be really nice. And it'll get warm enough that you can come back and play on the porch. So that'll be
Mm.
good.
I would love to, in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joan, do you have any, as far as online presence and such, where do people go to find your album and your recordings and all of that?
Well, you can find stuff on Amazon. I don't really have a website at the moment, but it's available. You can, like I said, you can look up Samba Nova and a couple albums that I have with Lucia Newell and some other
Mm.
people that's available, through Amazon. You can look that up too. So, or if people want to contact me at my my email at McAllister, it's just Griffith at McAllister.edu. And I just actually got some guy who's now every other day he says, I bought this, I bought that. So
Oh, of your catalog.
yeah, my
Yeah.
stuff, yes. Yeah.
Oh, very
So
cool.
yeah, it's out there, and I don't, like I said, we were talking before. I think it'd be fun to do another recording project once things loosen up a little bit. The thing I did with Laura was really fun, just piano and guitar, and I've been thinking for a while of maybe doing an album with just other guitar players, with which you would be part of that too. So yeah, I know,
Would love
super
to.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And are you like, I don't know how far ahead you're looking as far as scheduling? I mean, is there any jazz activity this summer outside, or anything part of the jazz festival that you know about yet? Or
Well, I don't know about any. Well, the only thing I know about for sure is that we're going to do concerts on our porch. Even if the theaters open up, and even if the Dakota asked me to come and play every week, haha,
yeah.
we're still gonna do that, because that was really fun. My partner Anita is, great piano player, conductor, and we had a whole bunch of actor singers come and sing songs that they loved, Sondheim, Hammerstein, whatever, and that turned out to be, well, it turns out actually for me too. It's like, when you just get to throw the gig on, then you can pick what you want to play, and that's really fun, and I think it's even more fun for some of these actor singers that if they're in a show, then they're singing the songs they know and that go with the show. But if they're going to do kind of a review of some sort, then they can pick songs that maybe they'll never get to sing in a show because it's a guy's song and they're a woman, or
Hmm.
or they're too young or too old for that role, and they still want to sing that song. And so it's been really fun. I think we did 25 concerts grand total, some a couple different jazz things, but a bunch of show busy ones. And people in our neighborhood that we didn't really even know, pretty soon they'd be texting us going, is there music on Thursday? There was music last Thursday. Are we having music on Thursday? And yeah, they got a little bit demanding across the street, but I think for me, sometimes I forget that when I go and play a gig, that is that the people who come to the gig, it's more important to them than I remember sometimes. I mean, it takes a lot of energy for people to get out of the house, put on something decent, find the joint, get a parking space. They're not going to do that unless it means something to them. And I think this sort of lockdown has made that more evident to me as a player. Um, because some of our friends would drive, all the way across town just to hear, you know, 45 minutes of show tunes, because it's missing in their life.
Hmm.
It's cool. So I think we're going to continue to do that, even if there are shows to play and gigs to play. And so
Oh,
kind of
that's
fun.
great.
Yeah.
And it certainly, the live stream thing. I mean, it's cool that it's there. It ain't the same thing. in
Yeah,
any way to live
no,
music. So
no, and it's the live stream thing. It's okay to do that as a solo person, but it just doesn't work to do duo stuff. The time lag is too weird, and it's still. I mean, it'd be fun to play with you a lot across the divide of our neighborhood, but it's not the same thing as having you sit here
right.
and going, oh, yeah, do that again,
Yeah.
So, and I miss that. I miss that, camaraderie with the people that I really love, playing music and I love playing for shows. I love playing in the pit. It's, you've been in there. It's a great thing. We play beautiful music and a really great band and kind of miss the experience of doing that these days too.
Mimi Fox had mentioned when I got a chance to talk with her, she uses this software called Jamulus, which I
Yeah.
don't
Have
know
you
if
tried that?
you. I have tried it once, and it was. I could see where it would be useful, and I could see where it's not as cool.
Mhm.
So I don't know if
Yeah,
you've tried it.
I haven't tried that one. I've tried a couple of different things, and it's not as satisfying as sitting across a crowded room. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. My
yeah.
my
Well,
impression was that it was to get it to not sound like a slapback delay or something when you're
oh
listening to it. It was you needed to set up a server or something amongst the you need to be
yeah,
like
no,
a few blocks away from the person in order
yeah,
for it to feel
exactly. We're in
right.
the same building. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's just the technology. I think that's an interesting thing because it's like as musicians we take for granted, how perfectly we can sync ourselves up in real time when we're
right.
playing, and that, we're talking about such fine, fine, fine slivers of time that we're accustomed to maneuvering all the time, whether it's
Hmm.
a groove that's a little bit this way or whether you're back phrasing a little this way or not, and that you just can't do that over the internet because it's not sophisticated enough.
Hmm.
With time,
All those
there's
little
little,
milliseconds or
yeah,
smaller, they all add up, and they're
yeah.
evidently really important. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, one time I was in the studio, it was a long time ago, and I played this solo, and the solo was actually gosh darn groovy, except that I kind of rushed the last little bit of it, and it didn't exact. I mean, if you're just listening to it while you're having pizza, you probably wouldn't even notice. But if you're actually listening for a real thing, you're going, oh crap. And so my engineer Steve Weiss, who runs Creation Audio, he goes, "Oh, no problem." So he goes in, as you know, with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just move stuff, right? And he just moved me over some like 0.0000001 of a second or whatever, and all of a sudden I sounded like Wes Montgomery. It was like so in the pocket, and like, and it was just a revelation about how small of
Hmm.
time slivers is the difference between being really groovy and just being as square as possible. So it's like, and pitches like that too. I mean, the difference between an A440 and an A440 0.0000001 is audible to us,
Yeah.
which is a sad story. This
Yeah.
is why vibrato was invented, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of fretless instruments or singing for
Yeah,
that matter. Yeah.
right. That's what,
Right.
right. Yeah, just widen that sucker. And one time though, I was talking to Soa Menza, again, African Music Ensemble director at MAC, and um, I don't know if you listen to those guys play, but the flute players that are in the African Music Ensemble, I always
Hmm.
felt that they were. I just wondered why they couldn't be more in tune. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but it just was kind of like it's just enough. It's like it seems like you could, I know they're wooden flutes, but blah blah blah. So I just asked Soa one day. I said, Soa, I said, it just may seem like a really terrible question, but it says it just seems like the flutes aren't aren't as in tune as they might be able to be. And he goes, well, that's because this is an African A. It's not a Western European A. And the A in my country is like this. And you take in all those timbres and all the pitches, and it makes this sound that is what we're looking for. He
Oh,
says a European A is like this.
oh,
And I'm like, oh, okay, cultural studies 101.
right. That's
But
huge,
he was
right?
very nice to me and didn't say I was just a complete, idiot. But that was also just a big light bulb moment going, you can't judge. You have to be careful what standards you're using to judge something, because, obviously, if those flutes are more in tune the way I think, they're not going to be as beautiful to him.
Right.
I just didn't understand. So
Yeah.
there
That's
you
a
go.
huge, I mean, how much of our world is us imposing the piano keyboard onto everything that we hear without
Hmm.
realizing how small a part of that world, or
That
the
really
globe, I
is.
mean, that actually
Hmm.
comes from. That's
Yeah,
Western
well, I
Europe.
watched maybe,
It's not the
yeah,
rest
and
of the
maybe you
planet.
watched this thing too, but there's this documentary about the impact of the accordion on folk music around the world. And
Hmm.
it's essentially that the accordion, I think is a mostly German instrument originally, but it also, you know, it may not be as in tune as the piano as far as the way that the half steps and whole steps go. I mean, it
Hmm.
is mostly, but that's the accordion plays basically what the piano does, with 12 half steps to the octave. And when the accordion started to be a thing that you could carry around the world with you, essentially it started to obliterate folk music that was using different scales. All of a sudden, they couldn't sing that music with the accordion because it was not in tune. Because they had different, like this whole step is wider here in this,
Sure.
and this half step is less, and all these gradations of pitch were lost, being superimposed into the room of the world of equal temperament.
Interesting. And
I
I
know.
suppose on guitar, people kind of get around that with either bending the strings or slide,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
Yeah, you can get away with
you
that
know,
more so, but it's just something to think about. Uh, what how we hear things and what we think is like. Again, I had the European A concept was a failed a failed observation.
that's great. That's
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
Yeah, I was. So it was always good for a lot of interesting information for sure.
Well, Joan,
Oh,
your dogs are
yeah.
probably calling out for you, and but this was super fun, and I
It's
really
always
appreciate
super
you
fun.
taking, yeah, and thanks for taking the time, out of your day to
Oh, yeah.
chat
Well, and thanks for
and
doing this with other people too, and thanks for posting all the cool stuff you do with your guitars and various grooves and cool bits and pieces of this. It's really beautiful.
thank you, Joan. Yeah,
Yeah.
I caved and bought a drum machine, but it has a
Oh,
window of time, and it's this winter only. Like COVID lockdown, I'm going to spend some time with this drum machine,
oh,
and then once I
super
can,
cool.
yeah. So, but
Well,
it's
all right.
small. It fits on a guitar pedal board, so I figure it's an excuse to slip me to no shame.
No, no, no,
So,
no. Say no more. We have to do what we're going to do here.
yeah.
So cool.
So
Well, thanks, Ben. It's
awesome,
awesome.
Joan.
Yeah. Let me know
Well, hey,
what's going
great to see you.
on. Always great to see
Keep us
you.
posted. We'll
Okay.
take
Cheers.
care.